The official confirmation from Ukraine regarding the strike is yet to be received. However, one authority disclosed to Kyiv Post that they were out in the open for a couple of hours, a duration sufficient enough to relocate the HIMARS, enter the coordinates, and strike them. Russian military bloggers have criticized their own forces for their incompetence and carelessness, following reports that nearly 100 Russian soldiers were killed when a Ukrainian strike hit a group of troops awaiting a speech from their commander. Unverified reports from Russia suggest the massacre took place near Kreminna in Luhansk Oblast, where members of the 20th Combined Arms Army congregated in a large group near the front lines, thereby positioning themselves within the range of Kiev's HIMARS rockets for 2 hours. While there is no official confirmation from Kyiv about orchestrating the strike, an anonymous Ukrainian official conveyed to Kyiv Post that it was a rather amusing situation where they stood in open air for 2 hours listening to a speech. This time was sufficient to target them, mobilize the HIMARS, enter the coordinates, and execute the strike. Rybar, a well-known commentator, shared, "A tragic incident unfolded within one of the divisions that were gearing up for an attack. People stood in a crowd for 2 hours, waiting for inspiring words from the division commander. However, instead of the commander, it was the HIMARS MLRs and enemy artillery that made their impact. In the Yuzhno-Donetsk direction, the recent battles saw fewer casualties than the careless error of the division commander." Another commentator, Vysoky Govorit, pointed out that it seemed Russian commanders hadn't learnt from previous incidents, and those responsible must be punished. He expressed his viewpoint, "If there are still commanders, in the middle of the second year of the war, who lead columns to the front, assemble personnel in one large group and then anticipate an enemy artillery strike, such commanders should face a firing squad regardless if they are colonels or even generals." According to a statement from Ukraine's Air Force, Russia executed another assault on Ukraine, utilizing Iranian-manufactured kamikaze drones and missiles during the early hours of Thursday. The Russians launched 4 X-101X 555 missiles from 295 MS strategic bombers and 20 Shahed 136 attack drones between 0:20 and 4:30. The air defenses successfully intercepted 1 missile, while the remaining 3 targeted industrial infrastructures within the Dnipro region. Local authorities reported substantial damage to 2 industrial facilities in Kryvyi Rih, resulting in 1 casualty. On the other hand, all of the kamikaze drones were neutralized. The majority of the drones and missiles, including the hypersonic Kinzhal missiles, were effectively downed by Ukraine's air defenses. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko revealed during an interview with Russia, one TV channel, that Moscow had proposed a lease agreement for Crimea during the early stages of its full-scale assault on Ukraine. Speaking to Kremlin propagandists, Lukashenko stated that his younger son Nikolai had facilitated a phone conversation with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. After an extensive dialogue, Lukashenko says Zelensky agreed to meet with the Russian delegation in Belarus. Lukashenko, who still claims to be the Belarusian president, asserted that Putin had presented him with a document initialed by the respective delegations. The document was quite reasonable. It even included a proposal for a long-term lease of Crimea, as well as discussions about the eastern Donbas region. If only this proposal had come earlier, now it's not feasible. However, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov refuted Lukashenko's comments about leasing Crimea, referring to the occupied Ukrainian territory as a region of Russia. At the beginning of the invasion, a preliminary peace agreement suggested that Ukraine and Russia should engage in bilateral discussions about Crimea and Sevastopol for a duration of 15 years. Nonetheless, the talks reached an impasse after numerous rounds due to Russia's war crimes and atrocities in Ukraine. Ukrainian delegates emphasized that Russia did not have the intention to end the war, but rather aimed to obliterate Ukraine entirely. In a meeting held on June 14, 2023, European Parliament members, MEPs, attributed the obliteration of the Nova Kakhovka Dam in Ukraine to Russia and stated that it's imperative for Russia to face the repercussions of this act of war. The official statement on the European Parliament's website stressed the MEP's strong condemnation of Russia's demolition of the Ukrainian dam, characterizing it as the latest in a series of war crimes committed by Russia that necessitates corresponding actions. The MEPs urged the European Union to maintain its robust support for Ukraine, impose new sanctions on Russia, and channel the billions in assets frozen from Russian oligarchs towards rebuilding efforts in Ukraine. In addition, the MEPs enumerated their anticipations for the EU summit slated for June 29-30, considering the recent incidents in Ukraine and progress on finalizing the EU's migration pact. The annihilation of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant, HPP, and subsequent outpouring of its reservoir is predicted to create significant water supply issues in 4 Ukrainian regions in the near term. The regions poised to be impacted are Dnipropetrovsk, Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, and Mykolaiv. Additionally, the provision of water to Crimea is expected to cease for a minimum of 1 year. Sergei Aksyonov, the self-declared leader of the Russian administration in the region of Crimea currently under occupation, has informed of a drone attack that took place on the peninsula during the night of June 14th, 15. A total of 9 unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, were detected over the territory of the Republic of Crimea during the night and early morning of June 15th, according to Aksyonov. He stated that air defense forces shot down 9 of these drones, while electronic warfare equipment brought down 3. Aksyonov further mentioned that 1 drone purportedly detonated in the village of Dokuchayev, located in the Krasnovardiskyi district. However, the explosion resulted in no casualties, only causing shattered glass in a handful of residential properties. Aksyonov reported that emergency services immediately descended upon the site, and he urged the local populace to remain composed. In a recent live interview on Suspilne TV, Irina Vereshchuk, Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for the Reintegration of Temporarily Occupied Territories, announced the creation of commissions in each local community in Kherson region. These commissions are tasked with documenting property damage and destruction. This measure, adopted in the most recent government meeting, applies to communities impacted by the disaster triggered by the explosion at the Kakhovka hydropower plant, HPP, dam. Vereshchuk emphasized that the government mandate calls for local authorities to establish these commissions expeditiously. These groups are meant to operate in each village and territorial community affected by the floods, with their primary duty being the documentation of property damage and destruction. The efficiency of report generation, data entry into the registry, and the eventual disbursement of compensation will be contingent upon the performance of these commissions, Vereshchuk added. As of June 15, 2023, the grim toll of Russia's comprehensive invasion on Ukraine includes the tragic loss of 488 children's lives, while more than 1,504 have sustained injuries. Young lives in areas such as Donetsk, Kharkiv, Kiev, and Kherson have been profoundly affected by the conflict. Sergei Aksyonov, the Moscow-imposed leader of the occupied Crimea, confirmed an aerial drone assault on the peninsula on June 15th. He reported the detection of 9 unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, in the airspace over Crimea during the nocturnal and pre-dawn hours. Out of these, air defense forces shot down 6 drones, whereas electronic warfare measures disrupted and grounded the remaining 3. 1 drone was reported to have detonated in the village of Dokuchayevsk, within the Krasnovardaysky district. Though the incident didn't result in any loss of life, the explosion caused window breakages in several structures. The National Resistance Center had previously mentioned that the Russian invaders in Crimea have intensified their efforts to locate the underground resistance in the area. In the Orikhiv sector, unique units of the Ukrainian National Guard have made considerable progress, ranging from 650 to 1,500 meters towards Novopokrovka, as reported by Colonel Mykola Urshalovich, the Deputy Chief of Planning and Utilization at the National Guard of Ukraine's main directorate. He shared this information during a digital briefing, as covered by an Ukrinform journalist. Urshalovich pointed out that in the Orikhiv region, despite the significant prevalence of mine and explosive barriers coupled with intense artillery bombardments, the National Guard units are conducting offensive operations as part of the defense forces. This has led to them making incremental advancements, moving from 650 to 1,500 meters towards Novopokrovka. Urshalovich also indicated that the adversary employed gun and rocket artillery last week in the Kupiansk, Lyman, and Severshchina regions, and launched airstrikes against the Ukrainian National Guard's positions. However, the Ukrainian guardsmen have maintained their positions. Even in the face of the enemy's air superiority and the heavy onslaught, involving 8 air raids and 550 instances of mortar, artillery, and multiple launch rocket system (MELRS) shelling, the Ukrainian forces haven't surrendered a single position, he added. A group of African leaders, headed by South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and Senegal's President Macky Sall, have arrived in Warsaw, Poland to embark on a peacekeeping mission with the goal of ending the conflict in Ukraine. A statement from the office of Polish President Andrzej Duda revealed that a conversation regarding Ukraine's current situation, Russian acts of war, support for Ukraine, and the African peace delegation had transpired between him and Ramaphosa. Zambia's commitment to global tranquility was emphasized by its leader, Hichilema, on social media. He expressed his honor in participating in this initiative to promote dialogue and peaceful conflict resolution between the two warring nations. On Thursday, confirmation came from Ramaphosa's office that he had reached Kyiv for discussions with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, slated for Friday. A meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in St. Petersburg is also on his schedule for Saturday. Reuters cited a confidential draft framework document stating that the leaders might suggest a set of trust-building actions to bring about peace between the two sides. Reportedly, these measures could entail the withdrawal of Russian forces, the extraction of tactical nuclear weapons from Belarus, the suspension of an International Criminal Court arrest warrant against Putin, and alleviation of sanctions. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz emphasized the necessity of deliberating on security assurances for Ukraine during a government press conference, as reported by DW. Scholz confirmed that such discussions have been ongoing with Germany's key allies for some time. The Chancellor underscored the readiness to ensure safety once the war waged by Russia against Ukraine concludes. He categorically ruled out any suggestions of freezing the conflict or legitimizing the Russian invasion, as some factions propose. Scholz pointed out that Russian President Vladimir Putin evidently intends to annex neighboring territories. He highlighted that this plan applies to Ukraine and is unmistakably relevant to Belarus as well. The German leader reiterated the significance of supporting Ukraine and engaging in substantial discussions about security guarantees. He emphasized the necessity of standing by Ukraine for as long as required and refusing to accept any imposed peace. Scholz firmly stated that Russia must retract its troops. After the assault on the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant by Russia, more than 200 tritons, a species listed in the Red Book of Ukraine as endangered and legally protected, were washed up along the Odessa coastline. Unfortunately, only 55 of these tritons managed to survive the incident. Over the previous week, Ukrainian forces have successfully liberated 7 villages in the Zaporizhzhia sector, reclaiming an area of 103 square kilometers, according to Alexei Hromov, the deputy head of the main operational directorate of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, as reported by the Military Media Center. Ukrainian units penetrated between 3 to 6.5 kilometers into enemy lines. In the Melitopol sector, Ukrainian forces moved up to 3 kilometers southward from the village of Mala Tokmachka, regaining control of 22 square kilometers and liberating the village of Lobkova. Meanwhile, in the Berdyansk sector, the troops successfully freed 6 villages, Lavadne, Novodorivka, Neskuchna, Storozhove, Makarivka, and Bilohorivka, thereby re-establishing control over an additional 81 square kilometers. According to Handelsblatt, citing NATO sources, Denmark and the Netherlands have funded the procurement of 14 additional Leopard 2 tanks for Ukraine. Rheinmetall, a German company, is set to deliver these main battle tanks to the Ukrainian armed forces. Contracts for the new supplies, which are worth several $100 million, have already been finalized. However, the export of this military equipment required the approval of the German federal government. Rafael Grossi, the leader of the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, described the conditions at Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant as serious in the aftermath of the Kakhovka Dam's destruction. Nevertheless, he assured that actions are underway to stabilize the situation. Grossi, who heads the IAEA, arrived at the Russia-seized nuclear power plant on June 15th, heading an inspection team in response to growing fears over the safety of Europe's biggest nuclear facility. The destruction of the downstream dam the previous week has limited the water supply utilized by the plant to prevent its reactors from overheating. Ukraine's nuclear energy company, Enerhoatom, reported on June 15th via telegram that Grossi's arrival had been delayed by a day due to security concerns. Grossi acknowledged the difficulty of the journey, calling it extremely difficult, but also important. Despite the precariousness of the situation, Grossi confirmed that he had observed enough water in the plant's cooling pond during his visit. However, he also cautioned about the potential risk of a major accident and stressed the need for global awareness about the potential hazard. Following his discussions with President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kiev on June 13th, Grossi has expressed concern about the relatively dangerous situation at the Russian-dominated nuclear plant due to both the burst dam and the onset of Ukraine's counterattack against the invading Russian forces. Ihor Ryturovich, a political scientist, has highlighted the importance of bolstering military aid to Ukraine by providing more military supplies, regardless of the outcomes of the NATO summit. While speaking on the Freedom TV channel on June 14th and discussing the meeting between Biden and Stoltenberg, Ryturovich emphasized that the demand for certain military supplies in Ukraine is not only persistent, but is also growing in certain areas. He stressed the importance of accelerating these supplies. Ryturovich underscored a crucial factor: the need for signing long-term agreements. Such contracts should ensure Ukraine receives sufficient aid from the United States and other NATO members for at least several years ahead, considering potential future aggression from the Russian Federation. This assistance aims at strengthening Ukraine's defense capabilities. Ryturovich insists that regardless of the pace or timing of Ukraine's integration into the alliance, which will be determined by the decisions taken at the Vilnius summit, Ukraine must receive ample and well-articulated support. He pointed out that similar statements have been made by representatives from the United States, Germany, and France, emphasizing that this support should continue until the war in Ukraine is entirely over. The Ukrainian Armed Forces General Staff, in its latest evening report, revealed that during the course of the day, missile and artillery divisions had targeted and successfully hit 2 command posts of the Russian forces: an S-300 air defense missile system, a personnel assembly, 3 ammunition stores, and 5 artillery units stationed at firing locations. Ukrainian Defense Aviation reportedly launched 13 strikes targeting Russian military gatherings throughout the day. Ukrainian forces also reportedly took down 20 Iranian Shahed offensive unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, and an Orlan-10 operational tactical UAV. On the other hand, Russian forces deployed 5 missile strikes using Kh-101, Kh-555, and Ku-59 cruise missiles. Over 40 airstrikes and 20-plus multiple launch rocket system attacks were documented. The major focus of Russian efforts is reportedly on the Lyman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, and Maryinka sectors, where intense fighting continues. There were 26 reported incidents of combat engagements in the last 24 hours. Civilian areas have not been spared. The report also indicated that Russian forces shelled residential areas in Avdiivka and Donetsk in the Donetsk region, resulting in civilian casualties. The community of Zelenivka in the Kherson region also fell victim to enemy shelling, resulting in the death of an 80-year-old woman and injury to a 69-year-old woman. After discussions at the 13th meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, Ramstein format, Ukraine's defense minister Oleksiy Reznikov announced that Western allies have agreed to start training Ukrainian military on F-16 fighter jets. Speaking alongside NATO's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg at a joint press conference, Reznikov welcomed the support and training as Ukraine continues to battle Russian aggression. Today I heard very important news about the so-called Bird Coalition or Fighter Coalition. We have received commitments from our partners that training will begin and that we will build together the design of this fighter consortium, starting with the F-16, he said. According to the minister, the training process will be led by Denmark and the Netherlands. and later other countries should join. He expressed confidence that there will be a bird coalition in Ukraine, as it already has a tank coalition, anti-aircraft coalition, artillery family, MLRS family, etc. This means that the future forces of Ukraine will remain the Eastern Shield of Europe and the Eastern Shield of NATO, Reznikov concluded. According to the Health Ministry of Ukraine, Russian forces have inflicted extensive damage on the nation's medical facilities since February 24th, with a reported total of 184 healthcare centers completely destroyed, and an additional 1,370 suffering damage. Regions such as Kharkiv, Kherson, Donetsk, Mykolaiv, and Kiev have been particularly impacted due to the destruction of their healthcare infrastructure. In an alarming event on May 26th, a hospital in the city of Dnipro was subjected to a missile attack by Russian forces. The assault resulted in the complete demolition of a 3-story building within the hospital's premises. Tragically, the strike claimed the lives of 2 civilians and left 30 others injured. The Polish border guard recently revealed that gunfire emanated from Belarusian territory for the first time, resulting in damage to a patrol vehicle. The weapon used in the attack remains unidentified. The commander of the unit that was subject to the attack relayed these events to the Polish parliament. Colonel Arkadiusz Tywoniuk, a representative of the border guards, speculated on the nature of the weapon employed in the attack, noting its high velocity and considerable kinetic energy. The year 2023 has seen a surge in attempted illegal border crossings from Belarus into Poland, with over 12,000 incidents logged thus far by Polish border authorities. These incursions are largely carried out by third-country nationals who arrive in Belarus before attempting to reach EU nations on foot. The majority of these individuals originate from Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and Somalia. Ukrainian Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov revealed that allied nations are anticipating the green light of a program dedicated to the training of Ukrainian pilots, engineers, and technicians on F-16 fighter aircraft by July. This information was made known following a meeting held in the Ramstein format and another with the NATO-Ukraine Commission, as reported by Европейska Pravda. The proposed training exercises are set to take place at a dedicated center, situated within a European nation, where a fully equipped training facility, including simulators, will be set up. English language courses for the Ukrainian personnel will continue in tandem with these exercises. Reznikov stated that official confirmation has been received from the Netherlands and Denmark concerning their commitment and preparedness to orchestrate and offer training to Ukrainian pilots, engineers, and technicians on the F-16 aircraft, an initiative the United States is also officially backing. He further added that each of the countries involved have expressed a willingness to contribute to the fighter jet coalition in varying capacities, with some offering financial assistance and others providing equipment. As per the proposed timeline, the exercise program will be finalized and endorsed by the NATO summit in Vilnius in July, with the exercises likely commencing by the end of the following month. Ukrinform has revealed that Yevhen Parabinis, the Ukrainian deputy foreign minister, has voiced expectations for a concrete decision concerning the timeline and procedures for Ukraine's inclusion in NATO, in addition to robust security assurances. He stressed, however, that these security guarantees were not meant to substitute NATO membership, but rather act as a temporary measure until Ukraine can achieve full membership. Parabinis highlighted that the most comprehensive security assurance comes with NATO membership, thanks to Article 5, which promises collective security. However, while Ukraine works towards achieving this, it needs alternate forms of security guarantees, a subject currently under discussion. Multiple models for these security assurances are under consideration, including the models implemented for Israel aimed at bolstering Ukraine's defense, as well as those applied to Finland and Sweden. Parabinis stated that collaborations with NATO partners are ongoing, with the goal of presenting a definite answer at the upcoming Vilnius summit. This response would include a detailed strategy on the prerequisites and timeline for Ukraine's acceptance into NATO. He refrained from speculating on the precise formulation of this strategy, but was emphatic that it must represent a progression from the resolutions made at the Bucharest summit 15 years ago. Czech President Petr Pavel also commented on the topic. suggesting that the security guarantees may resemble a blend of those provided to Finland during its accession ratification process and the approach currently applied to Israel.